Death of the Messenger. Written by M.J. Westerbone, narrated by 11 Labs. A tale of medieval murder, mystery and skullduggery. A prequel to the Draychester Chronicles. Chapter 1. At Draychester. Late summer, in the cathedral city of Draychester, England, the final years of the 14th century. The note arrived in the early evening. A lay brother from St. Mary's, the leper hospital that lay just outside the walls of Draychester, had delivered it to the precinct gate in the marketplace. Beyond the gate were located the cathedral and the bishop's palace. The bishop broke the seal and unfolded the paper. It was ink splattered, the writing in a small, neat hand he recognized only too well. He screwed up his eyes and read the contents with mounting discomfort.
Sir Hugh's head had swelled so much that he presented the appearance, not of a man, but of some decaying beast. His skin was hot and stretched like a bladder, so I wondered that it did not break apart. The remaining eye was sunken and dim. The mouth was closed by the swelling of the lips and the power of breathing obstructed. As the afternoon progressed, they inserted a reed into the hole where his nose had been to enable him to breathe, that the choking of his passages should not suffocate him. He suffered a restless hour of sleep, the head then ruptured with great and terrible discharge, and Sir Hugh expired.
"God's teeth!" exclaimed the bishop, crossing himself. The bile rose in his throat at the picture the words painted. "You'd better read this, Scrivener." He handed the note to his friend and chief clerk. "That nephew of yours, Osbert, has made me feel nauseous. What's wrong with just reporting Sir Hugh dead? That's all we needed to know. He does these things to try my patience." As Scrivener read, he tried unsuccessfully to conceal his amusement, and a chuckle escaped his lips. "I asked him to report events. He's followed my instructions a little to excess. He's young and has much to learn." The bishop grunted his displeasure. "It's not a laughing matter. I've nearly brought up my supper." "Yes, my lord." The bishop ran a hand over tired eyes and sighed. "Well, we knew this was coming. It's a bad business, Scrivener. Sir Hugh's death has put us in an awkward position." Scrivener nodded. "A leper, my lord, can hold no property once he is admitted to the hospital. The doctrine of the Church is to treat him as though he were already dead. Sir Hugh's will was executed as soon as they admitted him to St. Mary's Hospital. It was then we should have dispatched a messenger. If you remember, I did counsel against any delay." "I know you did, my friend. I didn't think the despicable old sod would decline so fast. If it's anybody's fault, it's mine. You'd better make arrangements, Scrivener. The sooner we send a message, the sooner we'll be done with it." The messenger stood outside the bishop's private chambers and paced about nervously. The letter he was to carry was already written, sealed, and placed safely in its leather pouch. Why the bishop himself wanted to see him he couldn't fathom. He believed he knew his duties as a messenger well enough. Scrivener had given him his instructions earlier. In truth, he was eager to be away to his own lodgings within the cathedral precinct and a good night's rest. Tomorrow would be half a day's ride to the coast, and if the weather held fine, as much time again on the ship crossing the channel. He was a poor sailor, and his mood was already dark at the prospect. Finally, the heavy oak door opened inwards, and Scrivener beckoned to him. The messenger waited just inside the doorway, unsure of whether to advance or stand where he was. He was surprised at the room's furnishings, never having been inside the bishop's inner sanctum before. It was cosy rather than the ostentatious display of wealth he had expected. In the corner, leaning against the wall, was a sword in a fine leather scabbard. He presumed it belonged to the bishop, who'd famously been a soldier in his younger days. A rug, of good quality but a little worn, lay in front of a stone fireplace. 2 chairs were positioned either side of the cheery flames. The clerk went and sat in one. There was a little table to one side for his quill, ink and papers. He busied himself sorting through them. Jocelyn Gifford, Bishop of Draychester, occupied the other chair. A wooden cup and a jug of wine were on the floor next to him, along with some scattered papers. Fast asleep and draped across the bishop's feet was one of his favourite greyhounds. The bishop hunched forward and studied the messenger through shrewd eyes. The messenger struggled to hold his lord's intense gaze. Eventually, the bishop looked away, reached down with one hand and located the cup and poured himself some wine. He took a sip, eased back in the chair, careful not to disturb the sleeping dog, and said, "So, tell me, Thomas, have you crossed over to France before?" The messenger found his mouth was dry. He walked forward and stood respectfully before the bishop. "Yes, my lord. I've twice delivered messages to a noble household in Paris." "You much of a sailor?" "No, my lord." "A pity. The crossing can be rough. Personally, I get blind drunk beforehand. I find it helps. Just don't fall overboard." The messenger struggled to think of an answer. "I'll be sure to bear that in mind, my lord." The bishop gave a nod in response, then said, "So you've not headed beyond Paris before? Into the countryside of the south?" The messenger shook his head, slightly irritated. "No, my lord, but I'm confident I can find this man Mudstone. I've done as much before, seeking others across the length and breadth of England. I've never failed to deliver a message." The bishop looked sceptical. "A bold claim, my friend." "Never?" The messenger shrugged. "Unless the intended recipient was already dead." The bishop placed his cup back on the floor, unimpressed by the messenger's sarcasm. "I dare say you'll do your duty, Thomas, but I don't think you've ever encountered the like of Sir Roger Mudstone. You must have heard of him?" The messenger pursed his lips together. He said, "I know of his reputation. He leads a band of men, the Company of the Rose. They fight for whoever will pay the most coin. They have no loyalty except to each other." The bishop gave a humourless laugh. "I sense you disapprove, Thomas." The dog twitched and whimpered, dreaming of rabbits as it slept, and the bishop placed an affectionate hand on its head. The messenger spoke hesitantly, choosing his words carefully. "I don't judge a man by his occupation, my lord. But perhaps it's better to fight for a just cause rather than just for coin." The bishop, a pitying smile on his lips, said, "Ah, a noble thought, my friend. But not always very practical. I can see you think of yourself as a man of principle, Thomas, but everyone must pay his way in this world. We can't always choose what we do to make ends meet." The messenger held his tongue and just nodded in reply. "Be careful, Thomas. Mudstone is a dangerous man. Find him, deliver your message and leave. That's all I ask of you. You're to take one of my own horses. You'll need a good mount. I promise you it'll be a tiresome journey." When the messenger had left them, the bishop stared into the fire and brooded, his cup tightly clasped between his hands. Eventually he said, "He'll have to do, although God knows we might be sending him to his death. From what I can see, he's just stubborn, or maybe arrogant enough to actually track Mudstone down. Either that, or get himself killed, possibly both." Scrivener shrugged. "He delivered messages for old Bishop Thorndyke. He's no innocent, and I don't fully trust him. What he is, my lord, is expendable." The bishop smiled sadly. "That's a little harsh, my friend. Still, Sir Roger has made enemies of most of the nobility of France. I can only imagine his contracts these days must be few and far between. Wherever he is, it'll be the arse end of nowhere by now. With luck, he might never be found." The messenger hurried across the green that separated the bishop's palace from the great bulk of the cathedral itself. The light was fading now, and the first of the stars was visible overhead. He had one last task to do before he could lay his head to rest. It was an unpleasant one, but he could hardly refuse it. He knew the man too well to not respond to his summons. Inside the cathedral, halfway along the great west wall, there was a long seat, recessed deep into the stonework. It was a favourite spot of Ralph of Shrewsbury. Between the Vespers and Compline prayers, it was almost certain to be deserted. This late in the day, only a few candles burned on the cathedral's famous shrines and on the high altar. The old man was all but invisible. His dark cloak, worn with the hood up, made him doubly so. He waited patiently, hardly moving in the dim light. Apart from his arthritic feet, that ached regardless of time of day or season of the year, it was quite comfortable. Just once he broke wind silently and then softly chuckled to himself. At his age there were few bodily pleasures left, farting being one of them. The smell hung in the surrounding air. Far down the interior of the cathedral, there was a flicker of movement in the gloom. Ralph could just make out a shadowy figure moving hesitantly between the huge pillars of the nave. It slowly made its way in his direction. Ralph remained absolutely still and watched with interest. The figure hovered around the nearest pillar to him and hissed, "Ralph, is that you?" "Of course it's me." "You're late. Come sit by me." Thomas, the bishop's messenger, darted across the space between them and slid onto the seat next to Ralph. The messenger suppressed a cough and said, "What's that smell?" Ralph chuckled. "Smell? That would be old age, my friend. You'll be the same someday, if you live that long." The messenger tried not to voice his disgust. The older Ralph got, the more repulsive he became. He seemed to revel in it. "What is it you want?" "I leave in the morning and I should be in my bed, not creeping about in the gloom." "Ah, always so impatient. I'd forgotten that about you, Thomas. I do remember a lot of other things, though. Still, it's been what? Perhaps 3 years. We've not spoken since before Bishop Thorndyke met his maker." The messenger sighed. "This new bishop is different, Ralph, not like old Thorndyke. He's clever, and so is that clerk of his." Ralph grunted his agreement. Thorndyke was easy to manipulate, I'll grant you that much. "I'm not asking to read the letter you're to carry. I am curious. Who is it you travel to France in search of?" "I never said I was going to France." Ralph tutted softly. "Don't be naive, Thomas. There's not much I don't know about within the walls of Draychester. I'm an old man. What else have I to do with my time but plot and scheme?" The messenger shifted uncomfortably on the stone seat. "No one would ever guess what's in that devious head of yours, Ralph. What use is the information to you?" "Better you not know, but perhaps this will ease your conscience." Ralph pressed a leather purse into the other man's hand. It clinked softly with coin. "A little something to make your journey easier. I hear you like a buxom whore now and again, or even 2 at once. Indulge yourself. There should be plenty of opportunity along the way." The messenger feigned outrage. "How dare you?" he hissed, pressing the purse back. He was surprised how forcefully Ralph pushed it back to him. After a moment's thought, the messenger weighed the purse in his hand and reconsidered. "God's teeth!" He cursed at his own weakness, but then swiftly concealed the purse under his tunic. Ralph cackled softly. He said, "Oh, we all have our secrets, Thomas. Some much worse than others. As for mine, I wouldn't want to burden you with them." The messenger shuddered. "I'm glad. You creep around the cathedral and precinct in that cloak, like some old black crow. Not a soul takes any notice of you, but you've a dark heart, Ralph." The old man just smiled. "So tell me, who is it you seek, my friend?" "Some knight, Sir Roger Mudstone by name. His brother's dead, and I'm to take him the news and a letter from the bishop. I don't know much more than that, old man. Much use that knowledge will do you. I hope it was worth the coin. Now I'm away to my bed." Ralph cackled again and murmured, "Well, well. Roger Mudstone, of course. I should have guessed it. His brother died months ago. What a web we could weave using that madman." The messenger slid off the seat and turned to say his farewell, but there was nobody there. Ralph had already vanished into the night. The hairs on the back of the messenger's neck rose up, and a shiver ran down his spine. He crossed himself and mumbled a prayer. The bishop's words echoed in his mind. "A man of principle, Thomas." He had nodded at the compliment, a liar in all but name. What principle was there in selling his lord's confidence for a handful of silver? He was to seek out a devil named Mudstone in the wilds of France, a man who fought only for coin. Perhaps he and this mercenary were not so different after all. Chapter 2. On the Road. The French countryside was a graveyard of ambition, dotted with the skeletal remains of barns and burned-out chapels. The messenger rode with a practiced caution, his eyes scanning not just the road ahead, but the sullen faces of the peasants who scurried from his path. He reached a hand inside his tunic, his fingers brushing against the heavy leather of Ralph's purse. The weight was a constant, nagging reminder of the bargain he'd struck in the cathedral's gloom. Ralph's sneering words about whores still stung, but the old crow knew nothing. This time the coin was not for debauchery, but for the apothecary's bill for his sister, Joan, and the bitter herbs that would keep the bloody cough from her lungs for a few more precious weeks. He knew the journey was a fool's errand, to seek a man no sane person would approach. He deserved this coin. It was his fee for hazard, the price for walking into a lion's den with a message the beast might not wish to hear. As this thought crossed his mind, he saw it on the horizon, a smudge of smoke, darker and thicker than any peasant's hearth-fire. He urged the horse into a trot. A mile or two further along the road, and he knew for certain, a trickle of figures on foot heading in the opposite direction confirmed it. The French villagers were battered, blooded and bedraggled, some clutching bundles of possessions. Over the last 30 miles he'd come across the same scene time and again. On seeing him, a man on horseback, well armed and in the livery of some great lord, they immediately took to the open fields on either side of the road or dived into the ditches. He wasn't surprised, nor did he slow his pace. They scattered before him like leaves in the wind. On reaching a crossroads he turned to the left, heading for the billowing column of black smoke that was rising into the cloudless autumn sky. He'd ridden about a quarter of a mile when he spotted two figures in the road ahead. A man, the size of a barn door, in a mud-splattered tunic, carrying a heavy bag over one shoulder. His companion was roughly half his size, dressed in rags filthy with mud and gore, and chewing on a half loaf. The messenger kept up the pace, confident they would stand aside. When he was within 10 feet and they still hadn't given way, he realized his mistake. He tried to bring the horse to a halt, or at least divert its path. At the last moment, the big man sidestepped, shot out an arm, and briefly caught hold of the reins of the horse. The messenger hurtled from his saddle and landed in a mud-filled ditch beside the road. The horse, spooked, galloped off. The two men walked over to the side of the track and looked down into the ditch. The messenger was flat on his back, his face just above the filthy water. The big man said, "Nasty fall, that. Wouldn't be surprised if you've done yourself in. A broken arm, maybe, or worse, could even be a leg." His companion sniffed and wiped a dirty hand under his nose. He took a mouthful of bread from the loaf, shook his head, and with his mouth full spluttered, "What sort of fool is it that rides towards trouble? And believe me, John, we're the worst kind of trouble you're likely to find." The messenger struggled into a sitting position and looked up at them on the bank. The ditch water was around his middle. He spat out a stream of water and said, "You're English. I was looking for the Company of the Rose." Big John ran a dirty hand through his grey beard. "That would be us. Although I wouldn't go spreading that name around, mate, not if I were you. Most folk don't come looking for us. They usually head the other way." The man in the ditch nodded. "I seek the company's captain." Both men on the road chuckled. Hob said, "Well, Christ's bones, that's a first. I've heard it all now. Nobody in their right mind seeks out Sir Roger. You're the bravest man alive, or the stupidest I've come across in a long while." The messenger said, "I've travelled all the way from England and across half of France. I've been on the road for weeks. You've not been easy to find. I carry a message intended for your captain." "Is Sir Roger Mudstone with you or not?" John sniffed. "Ah, a messenger. So this message for Mudstone, that would be in your letter pouch on the horse?" The messenger slowly got onto his knees, the muddy water streaming off his back. He crawled painfully up the bank and onto the road and with some effort hauled himself upright. He pulled off one of his leather boots and drained the water from it. The three men turned and looked back at the galloping horse, now fast disappearing around a bend in the road. Hob said, "Don't worry, it won't get far. Not a fancy beast like that. One of our lads will have it. He might decide to eat it, of course." Chapter 3. A Thwarted Entry. Sir Roger Mudstone hammered on the heavy oak gate. A small hatch opened near the top. Two bloodshot eyes looked out, and an angry voice said, "I command you to leave on pain of excommunication. You are not welcome here. To do violence and break the holy sanctity of this place is a sin, one that can never be absolved, and you will burn in the fires of hell for it." Sir Roger brought his face close to the hatch and said, "Well, that's not very hospitable of you. I could be a traveller in need, seeking shelter. It seems to me, in denying us entry, that you betray the very rules of your own order?" The eyes glared out at him, and the voice hissed, "We know who you and your men are. Be gone. There's nothing for you here." Sir Roger turned to one of the rabble who stood with him before the gate. He pointed at a small, hunched figure. The man gave an evil grin, his mouth full of blackened teeth. Sir Roger said in jest, "You, I forget your name. What do you think?" The man shuffled forward and held a hand up, which contained only the stump of a single finger. "Harry the Finger, Sir Roger." "Ah, yes. So, Master Finger, what say you?" The man used his stumpy digit to scratch at his ear. After a moment's contemplation, he said, "We're definitely travellers, Sir Roger. And we're all in need. Of valuables, that is." There was an outburst of chuckling from the surrounding men. Sir Roger smiled indulgently. "A good point. Well made." "So that's decided, then." He turned back to the door, pointed at the set of eyes and bellowed, "So open the bloody gate, or by all the saints I'll have it ripped off at the hinges. Don't try my patience, monk." The slot in the gate was slammed shut. Sir Roger sighed. He turned around and looked at the semicircle of thieves, oddballs and misfits that comprised some leading members of the Company of the Rose. He scowled at them. They scowled back. He said, "Have you looked for an easier way in?" Harry the Finger raised his single digit. "They're locked up tight, Sir Roger. There's a rubbish chute in the wall at the back, probably for the kitchen waste. It'll need someone small." A squat man named Walter, with a bald, sweaty head and a scar that ran from just below one eye down to his chin, said, "I'll get the ferret. He'll enjoy the challenge." Once he's inside, they'll hurry to open that gate to get away from him. There was a murmur of discontent from the others. Harry the Finger said, "You know as well as I, Walter. Once he's off the chains, it'll be us who'll have to round him up when he's done. He's like a wild beast once he gets the bloodlust on him. Far better to just torch the place than pick over what's left." Old Jack hobbled over to the gate and struck it with the palm of his hairy hand. "Let's get a couple of iron bars from that blacksmith's back there. We'll prise the gate off at the hinges." A man, not much more than a youth, wearing a battered leather jerkin and a cap with a feather, said, "You dimwit, have you seen the size of it? Bloody big thing like that. Must be an inch thick. They'll have barred it on the inside. It'll take all day. Let's just start a fire." Jack snapped back, "Watch your mouth, son. I was pillaging before you were born. What is it with you and Fireboy? Burn this, burn that. There'll be nothing left to plunder but ash." "Use the ferret. Save all the bother," said Walter. The young man shook his head forcefully. "No, fire is the thing. Smoke them out." Sir Roger, arms folded, leaning with his back against the stone wall of the monastery gatehouse, observed with increasing frustration. Eventually he bellowed, "Enough!" The youth turned to Sir Roger. "Look, we can stack some straw against the door and—" Sir Roger cut the discussion short by hurling a dagger that he snatched free from his belt at the speaker. The blade embedded itself just above the man's Adam's apple. Wide-eyed, he clawed at his throat, choking and wheezing, and then fell to his knees. With blood trickling down his neck, he toppled forward, planting his face into the mud at Sir Roger's feet. The wheezing slowly stopped. Everyone else froze in place. The only sound was the crackling of the fires of the village burning in the distance. Sir Roger casually wiped the mud from the end of his boot onto the man's hat, crushing the feather in the process. "So, now that I've got your attention, I'll tell you what we're going to do. You, Finger, and you, Walter, fetch the ferret. Get him up into that chute. He'll be keen enough once he gets wind of what we're about, and for Christ's sake don't let him free of the chains beforehand." The two men looked at each other nervously. Sir Roger glared at them and said, "We've not got all day." Walter nodded. Harry the Finger scratched his ear with his digit, and they both departed back towards the rising smoke. "The rest of you go round up some of our archers. Get up on the roof of that outhouse over there and start shooting some fire arrows into the inner courtyard. If they don't set the place on fire, no matter. It'll cause havoc. If they hit anyone, then so much the better. Unless it's the ferret, him we need to run riot. Now I need a drink. Come find me when it's done." With that, he walked off towards the burning village. One of the remaining men looked at the body in the mud and muttered, "That was mean, even for Mudstone." Jack shrugged. The young fool didn't know when to keep his mouth shut. Surprised he lasted this long. Anyway, waste not, want not. He limped over to the body, bent down with an arthritic grunt, and turned it over. He riffled through the man's tunic, retrieved a leather money bag, then removed the man's boots. The hat he considered for a moment, but decided it didn't fit with his image. Sir Roger walked back through the burning village. Clouds of dense smoke were rising from the roof of the church. The village priest lay dead, sprawled in the muddy street at the gate to his own graveyard. One of the company was picking over the body for valuables. He was removing a ring from the priest's finger by hacking it off with a knife. As Sir Roger approached, the man looked up and gave a wicked grin. "Good day, Sir Roger." Sir Roger gave him a withering look. "I see your respect for the church is as great as ever, Sergeant." The sergeant shrugged and said, "There was little enough inside. It's a poor place with a poor excuse for a priest. This ring here is a bonus, although it's proving troublesome to remove." Sir Roger gestured back the way he came. "I suggest you get yourself up to the abbey. There'll be richer pickings if those idiots ever pry the good monks out of the place. I've told them to use the ferret." The sergeant grinned with delight. "Now that's a thing I don't want to miss." He quickly popped the priest's finger, complete with ring, into a leather pouch at his waist, got to his feet, and set off at a jog. Sir Roger shook his head in disgust and murmured, "Christ's bones, I'm ready for a drink." He caught sight of another of his men, darting like a rat between the burning buildings, scavenging. He smiled grimly. The company of the Rose were remorseless. They'd extract every last thing of value. He'd wager there was nobody better in all of Christendom. As he walked on, there were shouts of greeting and the occasional curse from amongst the smouldering wreckage. The place hadn't been much to look at in the first place. After they were gone, he'd be surprised if anyone would think it worth rebuilding. Sir Roger's orders to the men were to leave any likely drinking places intact. Even so, he was surprised to see that the tavern was still standing. To be fair, calling it a tavern was optimistic. It was little more than an alehouse with a permanent sign. Sir Roger stood before the turf-roofed shack and tried to identify what the sign was. He thought perhaps it was the 2 dead badgers or the 2 squashed crows. It was hard to tell. Pushing aside the leather hanging over the doorway, he entered the dim interior. In the centre of the room, a low fire burned in a stone-lined hearth, the smoke drifting up to the roof and out of a small hole. Lay sprawled around the fire were several of his men, flat out on their backs snoring. Down the back wall was a long bench and trestle table. He walked over to the end of the bench, and several men who had been sitting there scuttled further up out of his way. They slid a jug and a wooden cup down the table towards him. He picked up the jug and sniffed it dubiously. He said, "I hope this tastes better than it looks." A voice from further up the bench said, "It's not good, but at least it's wet." He grunted in response, and then poured himself a cup of the dark fluid and swilled it around his mouth. It was strangely sweet with the flavour of boiled cabbage. He spat some bits of indefinable vegetable matter from his lips, swallowed, and then slammed the wooden cup down. He pointed an accusing finger at his men. "Those bloody monks up at that abbey can't be drinking this excuse for ale. It's like gnat's piss. I'll wager there's 2 barrels of Gascony's finest wine up there." He picked up the cup and hurled it across the room in frustration, causing several of his fellow drinkers to duck. "I grow tired of drinking this swill. Where are the riches we were promised?" One of his men, the worse for wear from drinking something other than the ale, staggered across to him. He slurred, "It was you who negotiated the contract with the Count, Sir Roger, and you did a piss-poor job of it too." There was a collective intake of breath. Sir Roger got slowly to his feet and advanced towards the drunk. He hissed, "What did you say to me, you whoreson?" The man swayed before Sir Roger. "The Count, shifty French bugger." His eyes were too close together. "You should never have trusted him, all that noble inbreeding." Before the man could speak further, Sir Roger grabbed him around the throat, lifted him off his feet, and pinned him up against one of the wooden poles holding up the roof. "You ungrateful little bastard. I've just about had enough with all of you. After everything I've done for the Company of the Rose. Think you could have done a better job? Then let us hear it. What would you have done differently?" He shook the man violently to elicit a response, but all he could manage was a choked splutter whilst clawing desperately at the fingers crushing his windpipe. A wiser voice from the bench behind said, "Come, Sir Roger, he's just drunk. We all know the Count lied to us." "It's the nature of our profession. These lands have been picked over too many times. The local nobles have been squabbling with each other for decades. We'll move on, as we always do. Someone else will be ready to pay for our services." Sir Roger reluctantly released his grip, and the man, eyes bulging, fell to his knees, gasping for breath. Sir Roger dealt him a swift kick to the side, which sent him sprawling into the dirty rushes that lay on the floor. He left the moaning figure face down in the filth and returned to the table. He snatched an empty cup from a startled man's hands and poured himself some more ale. He glared at his men. "I'm surrounded by the feeble-minded. By all the saints, I could have been somebody. 20 years in France, and look at me, you're all I've got to show for it. I was promised land, wealth, women, power, not spending all my waking hours with a bunch of stinking whoresons." From the gloom a voice said, "We're fond of you too, Sir Roger." Chapter 4. The Bishop's Horse. Big John, Hob and the messenger trudged down the road after the runaway horse. Hob forced the remaining chunk of bread into his mouth with a finger. He swallowed it with difficulty, then sniffed and wiped his nose with the back of a grubby hand. He studied the damp messenger walking beside him, and finally said, "This message you've brought for Mudstone. Good news, is it?" Before the messenger could answer, Big John said, "Christ's bones it had better be. He's a miserable sod at the best of times. So, what's it say?" The messenger shrugged. "I'm not at liberty to divulge the details. It's to be delivered directly into his hands alone." The big man said, "Sounds to me like you've not read it." "I can't read either." The messenger bristled with indignation. "I can both read and write. I'm a bishop's messenger. We don't read the correspondence we carry. It's private. I'd be breaking my oath to open it." "Ah," said Hob, "so it's from a bishop then." "What the hell would a bishop be doing sending a message to Mudstone?" John nodded. "An English bishop at that. You did say you'd come from England. Perhaps he wants to hire the Company of the Rose, or maybe he's complaining about all those churches we've burned. You're never tempted just to have a quick look?" The messenger ignored the questions. He said impatiently, "Perhaps we should just concentrate on finding my horse. You said one of your men will have it?" Hob grinned. "Oh, I wouldn't worry about that. You'll see soon enough. Nothing gets past our lads. I hope this bishop of yours has paid you well." John smiled in agreement. "You wouldn't get me delivering a message to Mudstone. Not for love nor money." The messenger sniffed dismissively. "I've heard of his reputation, but surely the tales are exaggerated to terrify the peasants." The big man clapped an arm around the messenger's shoulders, almost forcing him to his knees, and laughed delightedly. "Christ's bones, I can see you're a joker. It's a long time since we've had a good laugh." The messenger's horse stood in the middle of the road. 2 men were wrestling in the mud beside the puzzled-looking beast. One man was hammering at the other's face with his elbow. His opponent was trying to extract one of his attacker's eyeballs using his fingernails. Hob grinned proudly. "See, I knew the horse wouldn't wander far." They came to a halt in front of the fight. "What is it they're fighting over?" asked the messenger. "The horse, of course, finders keepers and all that. But it's my horse." "Strictly speaking, mate, you lost it, and now it's our horse," said Big John. "The Company of the Rose shares and shares alike. Apart from Sir Roger, of course, he don't share at all. Still, some of the lads can get a bit possessive if they take a fancy to something. Just look at these 2 selfish buggers. It's only a bloody horse." "It's from the bishop's own stables," said the messenger quietly. They stepped around the brawling men, and the messenger reached out to take the reins of the horse. He stopped as he found a grinning Hob holding a dagger against his side. He slowly lowered his arm. "Don't you worry about that for now, my friend," said Hob. "You wanted to speak with Sir Roger. We'll take you to him." Big John grabbed the reins of the horse and led it off down the road. He turned and said, "Hob's right. There are some nasty characters knocking about. Wouldn't want you to come to any harm, at least not before you deliver this message of yours." Hob gestured with the blade that the messenger should walk on. "Come on then, mate. No time like the present." Chapter 5. The Ferret. The ferret was getting excited. He stuck his tongue out, drooling, trying to taste the terror on the smoky wind, and he tensed against the chains holding him in check. He was dressed in rags and went barefoot. The two men behind struggled to hold him. As they headed down the road towards the abbey, they occasionally gagged at the strange feral smell that wafted off the ferret's body. "God's teeth, he's ripe today," said Walter, turning his head aside at the stench. "Where does Mudston find these madmen?" Harry the Finger had the end of one of the chains wrapped around his stump, around his waist, and then under a sweaty armpit. "I don't ask. That's why he's the captain. Now just keep a bloody good grip. The only place we want him going is up that chute." Approaching the abbey walls, the ferret gave a sudden piercing cry and surged forward, almost pulling his two minders off their feet. Burning arrows shot over their heads from the building on their left and plunged down, out of sight, into the abbey complex. Shouts, cries, and billowing smoke were already coming from behind the walls. It was only going to get worse. "Stand clear," shouted Walter. "We've got the ferret, and he's as keen as mustard." Men scattered in all directions before them. The ferret started squealing. They tugged him sideways down the side wall of the abbey. "Watch your backs," shouted Harry, and men scuttled out of their way as fast as they could move. The ferret was clawing at the stonework and looking up at the walls, eagerly jerking on his chains. "Calm down, lad, we're almost there," barked Walter. As they reached the rubbish chute, marked by a pile of rotting offal on the ground below, they gave the ferret's chains some slack. He jumped onto the wall and went straight up the grease-splattered stonework and hung by his hands and feet just below the opening. He thrust his head into the hole, gave a high-pitched shriek, and vanished inside. In seconds, the trailing chains vanished up the hole as the ferret climbed the narrow stone chute. Walter rubbed his hands in satisfaction. "Let's hope that comes out near the kitchens. Won't be long now. Those monks will be out that front gate as quick as an arrow from the archer's bow." Harry rubbed his one finger behind his ear and said, "Of that I'm sure, but it'll be us who'll have to lay hands on him afterwards. He's a bloody terror once he's off the leash. There's no telling where he'll go." They went back to wait in front of the abbey's gatehouse, where the rest of the company was beginning to mass. An occasional flaming arrow passed overhead and into the complex of buildings behind the walls. They could hear the crackling of the flames as something started to burn fiercely. Walter, lounging against the rough wall of the gatehouse, commented, "Nice afternoon for it now, and this wind should fan the flames nicely." Harry the Finger nodded amiably and wagged his remaining digit towards the stout wooden gate. "Won't be long now." A high-pitched, blood-curdling scream rose from behind the wall before suddenly being cut off with a sound like meat being chopped on a butcher's block. "The ferret, you think?" asked Walter. Harry nodded again and held his finger in the air. "Aye, just wait for it." Another piercing scream that seemed to go on and on answered the question. "He's only just warming up." Walter gestured to old Jack, who was sat with his back to the base of the wall, eyes half closed, face turned up towards the sun. "Jack, mate. Wake up, Jack." Jack opened his eyes fully and turned his face to them. "I'm not asleep. I'm just resting." "Well then, do us a favour, mate. Stop just resting and hobble on down to the tavern. Tell Mudstone we'll be inside shortly, if he cares to bring his arse up here to supervise." Jack said, "I'll tell him, maybe not exactly in those words." He sighed and struggled to his feet, and less of the hobbling. There was a chorus of "Pillaging before you were born, son," from the nearest men. He dragged himself off down the road, not before giving them a foul-mouthed tirade and an obscene gesture, which set them off laughing uproariously. Chapter 6. At the Abbey. Sir Roger arrived at the Abbey just as the main gate was flung open wide with a tremendous crash. A bunch of dishevelled and terrified monks fought each other to get through the space created. There was a relentless high-pitched scream coming from one of them that pushed the others forward. The source of the terror soon became apparent. The ferret clung to the back of a petrified monk as he emerged through the gate. The madman, splattered in blood and gore, was cackling insanely. He had dug his claw-like fingernails deep into the neck of the unfortunate brother and rode the monk like some demented donkey, driving the other screaming brothers before them. The ferret's chains trailed out behind as the monk hurtled past. Sir Roger and the rest of the company dived out of the way. The brothers ran for their lives back towards the village. "Christ's bones," swore Walter. "Look at the state of him. Quick, grab the chains." He set off in pursuit, followed by Harry the Finger. Harry shouted, "What did I tell you? He's getting too hard to control." Sir Roger roared, "I want the abbot and the prior alive. Bring them back to me here." He turned to the open gate of the abbey and walked into a scene of carnage. There were bodies everywhere in the courtyard. He thought perhaps the ferret's usefulness was ending. Inducing terror was one thing. Wiping out all those who knew where the valuables were hidden was just plain stupidity. A fire had taken hold of one side of the complex and was raging across the upper floor and roof. He could feel the heat, even from the gateway. Sir Roger carefully picked his way past the bodies and pools of blood and headed towards what he took to be the abbot's lodgings. The fire had yet to reach the building, but judging by the strength of the wind, it wouldn't be long. The door was open, a bloody handprint on the whitewashed wall beside it. With a last look at the fire, he darted inside. With practiced ease, he moved through the interior, briefly scanning each room. Finally, he found what he was looking for. The wall hangings and luxurious furniture marked out the abbot's private chamber. He began ransacking the space, looking for what he was sure would be a rich haul. He found a few trinkets, but nothing worth the trouble they'd gone through. As he smashed his way into a series of locked chests, each as empty as the last, he became increasingly enraged. He jumped up on a writing desk and swiped his foot through the material on top of it, scattering papers, quills, and ink across the room. Then howled in rage as black ink soaked into the Cordoba leather of his boots. Enraged, he jumped down and continued to ransack the room, overturning chairs, ripping the covers from the abbot's bed, and turning the whole thing upside down. He searched every nook and cranny in the room, but came up empty-handed. "God's teeth, I know there's silver and gold here somewhere," he hissed to himself. "There's not an abbey in Christendom where the abbot doesn't hide coin from his brethren." He strode back through the building and entered the blood-stained courtyard again. The fire had now consumed the entire roof of the burning building. It wouldn't be long before the abbot's lodgings caught alight. As Sir Roger approached the gatehouse, two terrified monks emerged, closely followed by Harry the Finger and Walter. Behind them, a large body of the men led by the sergeant filed in. Sir Roger, ignoring the monks, asked anxiously, "I bloody hope you've secured the ferret." Walter, panting for breath, nodded. "We jumped on his chains, Sir Roger, pinned him down, then I slugged him good and proper with a log." Harry the Finger grinned. "He's out cold." Sir Roger grunted. "I hope you haven't bloody well damaged him, Walter. I aim to sell him on. Sir Nicholas Morehouse was interested in taking him off our hands." He turned his gaze onto the monks. Harry urged the two men forward with a vicious poke in the back from his single digit. He said, "This is the abbot and the prior." Sir Roger rubbed his hands together. "Ah, the good brothers, how kind of you to join us." "Your men have desecrated a holy place, massacred my brethren. You'll burn in the fires of hell. Release us at once, and we will pray for your souls, and—" Sir Roger smiled disarmingly, reached forward, and grabbed the man by the throat and squeezed his windpipe. "You'll forgive me if I cut you short. It's been a long day, and I confess I'm not much interested in your ramblings. My soul burning in hell is not your concern. You're the abbot, are you?" The man, eyes bulging, barely managed a nod. Sir Roger nodded back. "Good, good. I thought as much. You being the fatter of the two. Look, this is simple. Tell me where the valuables are. Coins of silver and gold, silver or gold plates, jeweled crosses. Do I need to go on? You're a monk. You know the kind of thing. You've probably been hiding the stuff away for years. So, come now, be reasonable. I grow impatient, and I do bad things when I'm impatient. Isn't that right, Master Finger?" Harry wagged his finger at Sir Roger and chuckled. "Oh, you're a right one, Sir Roger. It's true. You do have a nasty side." The other monk, the prior, hissed, "You'll be excommunicated by the Pope himself for setting that creature upon us. You English are truly the devil's spawn." Sir Roger nodded amiably. "What will this be, Sergeant?" "My 4th or 5th excommunication." The sergeant scratched his head. "Think you're up to 5 already, Sir Roger?" In which case this will be your 6th. You've been a shocking sinner. Yes, I do believe you're right. It will be 6. I really must find the time to repent. The prior said piously, We have no riches. The abbot and I and my fellow brothers live simple lives, following strictly to the rule. Sir Roger poked the abbot painfully in the guts. The fat on your abbot tells me otherwise, my friend. He released the abbot, who fell to his knees gasping for breath, strode forward and clapped an arm around the prior's shoulders. Come now, let's be reasonable. We both know you're lying. Now, one way or another, you're going to tell me where you've hidden the valuables. The abbot, fighting for breath, gasped. Say nothing, Robert. God will protect us. Sir Roger sighed. Well, I think perhaps you both need a little encouragement. Tell me, can you swim, Prior? The prior looked baffled and shook his head. Sir Roger said, No matter. Sergeant, how deep do you think the well is? The sergeant looked dubiously at the well in the middle of the courtyard. He walked over and gingerly leaned on the low wall and peered down. He removed his head from the opening and said, Must be 50 feet at least. Can't even see the bottom. Excellent. Cut the bucket from the rope, then take the prior and tie one of his legs to the rope and put him down the well. I think head first would be appropriate, nothing like a medicinal dip in the afternoon. The terrified prior tried to pull away from Sir Roger, but he held him steady as the sergeant wandered back from the well, a malicious grin on his face. Sir Roger could feel the prior quaking. The monk blurted out, The abbot gathered up all our silver, the plates, coins, gold. We saw what you did to the village. He hid them. I know not where. I swear it. My lord abbot, tell them, please. Sir Roger turned to the abbot, who was still on his knees, and raised an eyebrow in query. The abbot crossed himself and said, Have faith, Robert. You'll come to no harm. Sir Roger shrugged and pushed the prior towards the grinning sergeant. He made to run, but the sergeant easily tripped him and dragged him struggling to the well by the legs. Walter grabbed the rope and pulled the bucket to the wall. He cut it from the rope and tossed it down the shaft. It fell with an echoing clatter, and there was a distant splash as it reached the bottom. Walter sat on the wailing prior as the sergeant quickly tied the rope around one of the monk's hairy legs. Sir Roger was just about to threaten the abbot when Big John, Hob, who was leading a horse, and the messenger pushed their way through to the front of the watching men. Hob shouted, Sir Roger, there's a messenger here for you. Sir Roger held up a hand in annoyance. Can't you see I'm working? Whatever it is, it can wait. The sergeant and Walter lifted the struggling prior and propped him on the edge of the wall around the well. The messenger, clutching his leather letter pouch tightly, looked on in horrified fascination. Sir Roger pointed a finger at the abbot. What's it to be? Are you prepared to see the prior take a dip, or will you do the Christian thing and tell me where you've hidden the valuables? You should be contemplating more spiritual matters, not worldly possessions. The abbot crossed himself, looked at his prior and said again, They wouldn't dare. Have faith, Robert. I'll pray for you. Sir Roger said, I'm sure you know that pride is a sin, abbot. Shame on you. Sir Roger gave a nod, and Walter and the sergeant pushed the screaming prior over the edge, head first. He hurtled down the shaft, the rope unwinding at a ferocious pace from the pulley. The echoing scream suddenly stopped with a splash as the prior entered the water. Sir Roger gestured with a hand. Let's hope there was enough depth of water at the bottom. You can pull him back up a bit, leave him halfway. He can reflect on the error of his ways. Walter and the sergeant heaved on the rope to raise the prior. A muffled coughing and spluttering, followed by low moans, confirmed that he was still alive. With some effort, they hauled him halfway back up the shaft and then tied the rope off. Sir Roger peered at the messenger stood between Hob and Big John. He said, Who the hell are you? Are you Sir Roger Mudstone? Sir Roger was tired and irritated. He snapped, Of course I bloody well am. Who else would I be? I don't believe I've ever had the misfortune to lay eyes on you before. My name is Thomas Fitzherbert. I carry a message for you from the Bishop of Draychester. Sir Roger looked at him incredulously, as though he'd just swallowed a fish. Draychester? A message, you say? The messenger nodded. Yes, from the bishop. Sir Roger ran a hand over his grimy face in genuine puzzlement. You're a bloody long way from home. What the hell would old Thorny want of me? I haven't set foot in Draychester in some 20 years. Bishop Thorndyke died a few years ago, Sir Roger. Sir Roger grunted. Now I come to think of it, I heard a rumour, some scandal about his death. It involved a whore, I believe. He was a devious old sod, but sending me messages from beyond the grave is a feat even for him. The men chuckled half-heartedly at Sir Roger's attempt at wit. The messenger said, "It's Bishop Gifford of Draychester, who has asked me to deliver this to you." Gifford? Only Gifford I know was a lackey of our new king. Never heard of a Bishop Gifford, but then I don't keep up with the affairs of the church. Well, don't just stand there, give it here. Sir Roger reached over and yanked the leather pouch from the messenger's hands. He opened it, took out the sealed letter, and tossed the pouch aside. The messenger reached to pick up the pouch, but Big John reeled him back. He whispered, "Patience, my friend. Retrieve it later. It's best not to distract Sir Roger, not if you value your life." Sir Roger peered at the seal curiously. He didn't recognize it, and presumed from what he could make out that it was Gifford's. He broke the seal and unfolded the letter. The wailing from the well rose in volume. Sir Roger winced. "Can you not shut him up?" "He's giving me a headache." Typical bloody monk. No thought for anyone else. Walter shrugged, took a knife from his belt and cut the rope. The prior was sent hurtling back down the well. Walter and the sergeant looked over the wall, but it was too dark to see if the prior had survived. The sergeant mouthed "idiot" at Walter. The abbot hauled himself from his knees. "This is outrageous, that you would—" Sir Roger silenced him with a glare. He pointed his finger and said, "One more word out of that fat mouth of yours, and you'll be joining Prior Robert on his swim. Now back on your knees and start praying you remember where the gold and silver is." He returned his gaze to the letter. He read it slowly from beginning to end, read it again, and then clenched it tightly in his fist. He shook it at the messenger. "You, messenger, you know the contents of this letter? This Bishop of Draychester, this Gifford fellow, he writes that my brother Hugh is dead?" Thomas the messenger nodded, swallowed hard and croaked. "Bishop Gifford's clerk told me some details. I believe your brother died some months ago. I'm sorry to be the bearer of such bad news." Some of the men mumbled a word or two in condolence. One or two crossed themselves, more out of their own fear of Sir Roger's reaction than anything else. At first Sir Roger remained stony-faced, stunned at the news. Finally, an eyelid twitched. He smirked once and then chuckled, softly at first, then stronger, until he laughed out loud, deep, heartfelt, joyous belly laughs. He held both hands up to the sky in triumph. Even in his most drunken states, the men of the Company of the Rose had never seen Sir Roger laugh with such enthusiasm. It was infectious, and soon the entire company was roaring with laughter. None sure why, but it seemed the thing to do. Only the abbot, still on his knees, and the messenger looked on bewildered. The messenger finally shouted above the din, "I don't understand." "You weren't close?" At this, Sir Roger wheezed. "Close?" "Close? I hated the stinking whoreson." He doubled up, his hands on his knees, laughing hard enough to bust a gut, the tears streaming down his face. Sir Roger finally gasped, "Christ's bones, he's actually dead. The bishop asks that I return. There's the matter of the will to be settled. I'm the last of the Mudstones. I'll bloody well inherit everything." Harry the Finger wiggled his digit in Sir Roger's direction and said, "Does that mean you'll be leaving us then, Sir Roger?" Sir Roger, wiping tears from his eyes, looked at him in astonishment. "My miserable, conniving bastard of a brother is dead. The sun is shining. Money and land await me in England. Of course I'm leaving you half-wit. Why would I want to stay here with you donkey fiddlers?" The sergeant and Walter wandered back from the well. Walter cleared his throat hesitantly and said, "It's been what? 20 years you've been our captain, Sir Roger?" Sir Roger nodded sadly. 20 stinking, grinding, brutal years in France with you whoresons dragging me down at every step. It's a wonder I'm still sane." The men looked down at their boots. Nobody dared say a word about Sir Roger's sanity or lack of it. The sergeant scratched his head and said, "But if you're not here with us, who's going to be captain?" The others nodded at the question. Sir Roger looked at them in exasperation. What the devil do I care? Show some initiative, decide between you. We finish up here and I'll be gone at first light. Destiny beckons, and it's been a bloody long time coming. Big John said, Last I heard, Sir Nicholas Morehouse's company was looking for more men. We could join up with them. He's almost as big a bastard as you are, Sir Roger. Sir Roger nodded. Well, there you are. I can't think of a finer compliment for a captain. I'm sure he'll welcome your services, well, some of you at least. Old Jack said, Don't suppose the pay can be any worse? Harry the Finger scratched his stump. Good point, he murmured. Hob gestured at Sir Roger, a cunning look in his eyes and a sly smile on his lips. Seeing as you're all set on leaving, and you being a wealthy knight now, what's stopping us just ransoming you off to the highest bidder? We could start by asking Sir Nicholas. He hates your guts. I'm sure he'd be more than willing to pay us, and then sell you on to the Frenchies. You've pissed off dozens of 'em. There was a collective intake of breath from the rest of the men, and then a ripple of realization that the balance of power had just shifted. They eyed Sir Roger speculatively. He eyed them back. Some drew daggers and swords. Sir Roger weighed the odds. There were at least 50 men between where he stood and the gate. A dagger appeared in Sir Roger's left hand while he drew his sword with his right. He said, It's an interesting thought, Hob. The thing is, some of you would die in the process. The sergeant shrugged. Occupational hazard, Sir Roger. We risk death every day. Sir Roger slowly edged backwards until he was level with the still kneeling abbot, who looked fearfully between the men and Sir Roger. He gave the monk a poke with the end of his sword, just enough to get him on his feet again. He turned his sword back towards Hob and said menacingly, I didn't know the sergeant knew such long words. As for you, Hob, I suggest even you would rather avoid the chance of this up your arse, or are you just stupid? Hob grinned back. Ever the flatterer, Sir Roger. I always did like that about you. Sir Roger saw the throwing axe as it left the crowd. It sailed between Hob and Big John. It was poorly thrown and tumbled slowly through the air, slicing off the left ear of the big man in passing. Sir Roger, with impeccable timing, stepped behind the abbot. The monk barely had time to register surprise before the axe buried itself deep in his chest, with a sickening thud and a spray of blood. He flailed his arms about briefly, then his head slumped down. Sir Roger, with some difficulty, propped the dying abbot up with a hand to the back. Over the monk's shoulder he shouted angrily, You idiot! If you kill me, how can you ransom me off? I'm disappointed. I thought I'd taught you better. What a shambles. And we're meant to be the professionals. The abbot won't be telling us any of his secrets now. And who threw the axe?
The monk taking me bloody ear off.
Howled an outraged Big John, blood and gore pouring down the side of his face. With a blood-stained hand clamped to his head, he dropped to his knees and started to search frantically in the mud for his missing ear. The others ignored him and glared at Sir Roger menacingly. Sir Roger made his move. He shoved the body of the abbot forward and leapt away, darted around the well and ran back towards the open door of the abbot's lodgings, through which he disappeared. The company of the Rose, apart from Big John, surged forward in pursuit, barging past the messenger. The messenger, although half dazed by the speed of events, grabbed hold of the bishop's horse, which trod a human ear unseen into the mud, and quickly left by the gate. Big John was too occupied in his search to attempt to stop him. The message had been delivered into Sir Roger's hands as the bishop had ordered, and the messenger reasoned he'd done far more than his duty required. His only thoughts now were to put as many miles as possible between himself and the madness of the Company of the Rose. Chapter 7. In the Woods. The messenger took the road north, away from the burning abbey and village. At first he urged the horse into a gallop and only slowed the pace when he'd covered some miles. He deliberately left the road and followed a narrow, winding track up onto a wooded hillside. As the sun went down, he made camp at the edge of the tree line. He gazed back across the countryside he'd travelled earlier. A smudge of smoke in the far distance marked the location of the abbey. He shuddered and crossed himself. The messenger awoke with a start, something having dragged him back to consciousness. He was under his riding blanket, sitting with his back against a tree. Judging by the light, it was just before dawn. He looked around warily, but all was quiet. The horse stood tied to a branch nearby just as he'd left it. His small fire was now just glowing embers in the ash, but he was warm enough under the blanket. He stifled a yawn, unwilling to make a move until it was actually dawn. The day ahead was going to be long enough as it was. Suddenly, from around the side of the tree came a hand that held a dagger to his throat, the tip coming to rest just above his Adam's apple. He sat as still as he could. "What was your name again?" "Herbert something or other," whispered a voice in his ear. He recognized it only too well. He croaked, Thomas Fitzherbert." "Sir Roger?" The voice chuckled. "The same." "A stroke of good luck coming across you like this. Some would call it fate, I suppose. I've been walking all night." The messenger said, "I wanted to get off the road to rest, the safer option, I thought." The tip of the knife ran down the skin of his throat for an inch and then back up, scoring the barest of a mark. "A good plan." The fire was a mistake, though. I could see it from the road. "I'll be more careful in future." "Ah, well, about that. I'm afraid I'm going to have to kill you, Thomas." "Needs must and all that. It's nothing personal, you understand. Although, come to think of it, it's probably your own fault. What sort of fool would come looking for me?" The messenger pondered his fate. All he could think to say was, "Well, the bishop won't be happy. The horse is one of his own." Sir Roger grunted his acknowledgement. "It's a fine horse. I won't be able to return it to him, unfortunately. I'll be lucky if I don't end up eating it, and I'll certainly sell it once I get to the coast. For now, it's going to keep me well ahead of my old comrades back there. I don't need a messenger." The messenger swallowed hard. "I see. You're heading back to England, to Draychester?" "Yes." The messenger thought it worth a try, he said. "I could be useful. It's a long journey. The roads are dangerous. 2 armed men would be safer than 1. Sir Roger considered the offer for a moment, then dismissed it. "We'd really have to steal another horse. It's a lot of trouble. Not sure I have the time or the inclination, and, to be honest, I prefer my own company." "You're sure?" "Very sure," said Sir Roger, clamping a hand over the messenger's mouth, and with his other sliding the knife up under the man's chin and thrusting it deep into his throat. The brief, wet struggle was over in seconds. Sir Roger withdrew the blade and calmly wiped it on the dead man's tunic. He took a moment to rifle through the messenger's belongings, retrieving a heavy purse of coins that clinked with a familiar sound. He let the body slump against the tree. He then turned his attention to the horse, a fine, strong beast from the bishop's own stables. It would serve him well on the long journey north. Mounting the animal, he gave a last indifferent glance at the man he had just killed. He turned the horse's head towards the road, his gaze fixed on the northern horizon. The sun was rising, and with it, his new life, an inheritance, and a whole world of opportunity awaiting him in England. Afterword, by the author. Dear listener, I hope you enjoyed this prequel to the Draychester Chronicles series of novels. My books blend my love of medieval British history with a fast-paced, exciting story. I love to read historical thrillers and mysteries, and I love to write them too. To modern eyes, late medieval Britain is a fascinating mix of the familiar and the strange, sometimes brutal, sometimes magical, but never boring. Be the first to receive the news of upcoming books in the series, exclusive offers, and free downloads. For lots more information, visit my author website at westerbone.com or search Westerbone or Draychester on your favourite search engine. The End. This has been Death of the Messenger, written by M.J. Westerbone, narrated by 11 Labs, content and production are copyright 2025 by M.J. Westerbone.